Welcome, my name is Andrew Keaton. I am the Digital Media Specialist for Richmond Performing Arts Alliance, and today we are going to take a look at one of my favorite programs, Gimp. Gimp is a really cool program for a couple of reasons. One, it is comparable to Photoshop and all the cool things that it can do for photo manipulation, creating text, creating memes. You can even use it for a little bit of animation. The best part about Gimp is that it's free. So Photoshop may have a couple more bells and whistles, but you definitely can't beat the price of free. So hopefully you've already downloaded Gimp, but if you haven't, you want to go to gimp.org and downloads. There it'll be, and it will automatically detect whatever operating system you're using. So if you're on a Mac, it'll give you a Mac version. If you're on a PC, it'll give you a Windows version. And if you're on Linux, then you get a Linux version. It was probably already with your distro. If you've got Linux, then you probably know all about Gimp already. But if you don't, here's what it looks like. So at the very top, we've got our main options, the usual suspects: file, edit, select, view, image, layer, colors, filters, windows. If you don't see any of the spaces I'm about to show you, check up here in Windows and it will show you. And if there's something specific you're looking for, you can always type it in the search bar for help. So below that, we have our major tools. First, we've got our selection tools, a rectangle and an ellipse selection tool. Free select tool, we'll be using that a lot. That is great for drawing around backgrounds and cutting things out of backgrounds. It can also do a geometric version of the tool, and I'll show you that in a moment. The fuzzy select tool, which is really good for selecting any one particular color. Select by color tool. The really cool thing about how they do this is if you lose track of whichever icon is which, you could just float over top of it and the tooltip will pop up and tell you exactly which tool it is that you've got there. The Paths tool, we're going to be using that in a moment. That's really cool for creating vector artwork. And let's see, transform options. This is how you can move or scale or rotate any of the images and layers that you've got there. We'll definitely be using the shear tool and the handle transform. Paint bucket, bucket fill tool is how you'll fill any selection with a selected color. And we see our colors down here right by default. We've got black and white. Text tool, very, very useful. We'll get into some of that. We probably won't mess with the warp transform. We'll definitely use the flip tool. Probably won't mess around with the gradient tool or the pencil. This is a huge program, really. So there's thousands of hours worth of great tutorials available on Gimp's website and on YouTube for taking you all the way from a beginner through an advanced user of this program. It's a really great community out there that can help you figure out whatever you want to know about this program. So we're going to go over the basic stuff pretty quick. So some of these things we won't use today. The important thing to note is that all of our tools are going to be over here on the left side. And when you click on any one of them, below that, you get all the options for that specific tool. On the right here, we've got our various fonts, we've got various patterns, and we've got various brushes for any of the brush tools like the eraser, or so you can have a little variance. And then below that is probably the most important section, the layers section. Layers are very, very important for keeping things organized, for making non-destructive edits to anything that you're working on. If you've got something that you've gotten almost where you want it, but there's one more thing you want to tweak, you can create another layer and change that without risking ruining anything that's already working below. As an artist, that takes a lot of the nervousness away from messing with something. Sometimes you want to do something else to it, but you're afraid that you're going to mess it up, and that's the really cool thing about doing this kind of work digitally, is that you can always undo. Some of the most important things to know if you are new to a computer here is the quick keys that will make your life easy. Undo is my favorite of those. It is Command Z or Control Z if you're on a PC. That can undo up to, I think, 20 things that you've done depending on which program you're in, and it will take all of the anxiety away from anything that you do. If you mess something up, Command or Control Z and you can undo it and go right back to where you were before it started. Equally important is Command or Control S, which is save. You definitely want to save your projects early and often. There's nothing worse than having a bunch of projects named Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled 3. You can never figure out exactly what it is that you're trying to get back to, and that's pretty painful. So we've got undo, Command or Control Z. We've got save, Command or Control S. What are some other quick keys that we should know? Command and C for copy. Command and V for paste. Those are the big four. You should definitely know copy, paste, save, and undo, because they work pretty much around whatever program you're using. If you're on Photoshop instead of Gimp, if you're in Microsoft Office instead of any of these other programs, those are all pretty universal. Copy, paste, save, and undo. Let's start by creating a new canvas, because right now you see all this empty space. We need to create a new image. So we've got templates here that have lots of different options if you are going to be using something for TV or broadcast or a website. A lot of these templates are built in and ready for you. I'm going to make a 1280 by 720, which is your 720p for video. And it starts us off with a big white space. We see over here in our layers that there is a background layer and nothing else. So what I'd like to do today first is, since we've all been cooped up, I've been thinking about all the places that I would go if I was not on lockdown. So I've been using my imagination and thinking about places that I'd like to go, and I've been searching the internet for some of those places. So I've put some pictures of places I'd like to go on my desktop here, and I'm just going to drag and drop them into our canvas area here, and it will ask us if we'd like to import it. I say go ahead and do that, and it'll plop it right in there. Notice that when we did that, it created a new layer with the space. So since this image is a little bit smaller than our canvas, we can still see the background underneath it. If we want this to fit the space, we're going to go over to our scale tool and just hover over it. If you don't see the icon very clearly, just hover over it and it will tooltip pop up and tell you exactly which one you're using. So I'm going to use that and click and drag up, click and drag down a little bit more, cover all our edges. It's better to be a little bit bigger than the canvas than too small. There, that looks good. And when I'm happy with how I want that to look, you see the little scale toolbar has popped up here. We're going to click scale to finalize it, and it crops off all the other stuff that was outside of the canvas. So definitely want to go to space, that'd be cool. Love to see the Taj Mahal, so I'm plopping that down there. Egypt. Oh, I love that camel. Now this one looks like it's a little too big, so I'm going to scale that down. And we can see the width and the height here in our little toolbox that comes with our scale tool. And I like that scale, but I want to move it, so I'm going to use my move tool here. And I definitely want to get my buddy the camel in this shot. I like the look on his face. He's taking it easy. And you notice when you hover over these and the tooltip pops up, there's a little letter that comes next to that. That is a quick key that will move specifically to that tool. So as you get used to this program and as you use it more, using things like those quick keys to move between tools rather than dragging your mouse all the way over and clicking on it can save you a lot of time. So I would recommend that anytime you hover over one of these, try and take note of what letters associated with that, or from even in the toolbar here, you see there are quick keys associated with some of our more common See, there's save, and there's save as if you want to change the name. So keep an eye on that when you're going through your menus, because it will tell you the quickest way to reach those things. All right, so I've got Egypt, I've got the Taj Mahal, I've got space. I'm going to bring in a TARDIS to go along with our space stuff. So that'll be fun. Make sure this fits on the canvas. I want it to be a little bit smaller so it'll look like it's flying around in the background. Scoot that into place here for now. I'm going to scoot that layer down just on top of space, but below these others. You see we can turn those layers on and off so we can see how they're stacked up with each other. And finally, I don't know if any of you have been here, but I was definitely thinking that it would be cool to live in Animal Crossing. They look like they're having such a good time. They look like they're having fun. All right, so we've got all the places that we'd like to go and a couple little extras here. So let's take an image of ourselves and plug that in there. Whoa, there I am. Depending on what kind of camera you use, these could be a lot bigger than the images you find on the internet. When you put something up on the internet, you want the file to be as small as possible so it's easy to load and it's easy to download for users. So when I use my real camera with a lens on it, instead of grabbing something off of the internet, it's really big comparatively. So let's scoot that into place there and make them a little bit smaller. There we go. There I am. All right, so there's a picture of me, and I want to go to all these places and make little postcards for where I'm going to have been visiting. So I'll shrink this down just a little bit more. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to get my figure off of this background. So it looks almost like the same color, which means you could use something like this, the fuzzy select tool. Now this tool is really good for if there is high contrast, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. But watch what happens when I try to use this tool to select all this background. It notices the subtle difference between this tone of green and this tone of green. You can see that there's a little bit of a hot spot right there where the light's brighter. And it's close to some of the edges where there's a sharp difference, but then some of these others it misses entirely. So this tool isn't very reliable for something like a photograph. What we want to do, and this will take a little bit more time, but it offers the opportunity to be a little bit more precise too. So I'm going to use my free select tool. And when I click there, it gives me these little points. So these points are mathematical representations of coordinates on the image. So this way we can make a geometric line, or if I want, I can hold the button down and you see it's drawing a straight, well, it's not making a straight line, it's following whatever I'm doing with the mouse. So if you've got a steady hand, this might be the easiest way for you to do it, but I know all the time I'm told, gosh, I can't draw a straight line. And you can see the way that I'm doing this, I'm not real good at straight lines either. So I will oftentimes bounce around between holding the button down, and then sometimes I'll go in and click if it's a little bit easier to get around some of those lines. And I'm not going to do a super duper painstaking job of cutting myself out of this here for the sake of brevity. I am going to do a little bit quick and dirty. The idea is to trace along the edge of the figure that you want to cut out of the background, as I'm doing here. And if you are trying to do this a little bit quick, I would say to err a little bit, to cheat it a little bit inside of the line there, just so you don't have kind of a haloing effect. All right. And I'll show you what that means in a moment, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some leftover green in this. Okay. And there you see, we've got our figure selected. I'm going to go to Layer, Transparency, go to Layer, Transparency, and Add Alpha Channel. Now, right now, if I've got this figure selected and I press Delete, I disappear. We don't want that. We're going to press our best friend on the computer world, Undo, Command or Control Z, and we're right back to where we were. That's much better. Let's do this. Let's select the inverse. So I'm going from Select to Invert, and you'll see that there's a quick key associated with that. It's Command or Control I. So now I've got all the green selected on the outside of the figure, and when I press Delete, I am left with just the figure. Now you can see, maybe not as well on here. Let's make a little bit clearer look at this. Right now you can see there's a couple of spaces there where I didn't quite hit the mark on my drawing there. I'm going to use my zoom tool to zoom in on the hands here. Oh yeah, that's gory. Not quite perfect. But what we can do, clean this up a little bit, is go to our eraser tool. Now, you can click these little extra bits off, but I would recommend, especially since you're using the eraser, to make lots of little clicks rather than holding it down and dragging it. So if you hold it down and drag it and then make a mistake, something like that, where you end up cutting off a piece that you don't want, you're gonna have to take lots of steps back if you've drawn a whole lot of stuff. So I click just a little bit around each edge so that if I get one I don't like that, I don't have to go right back to the beginning of a long trace to get it back. And I'm going to change the size of my brush. You can see you can change the size here, and the quick key for that is the bracket key. Looks like a little curly Q, and if you do the one that is pointing to the left, it'll make it smaller, and if you do the right bracket, it will make it larger. So I usually use the small brush and these tight lines here. Clean that up. So, and as I get further along in this, I realize I haven't saved. That's not a good look. If there was a lightning strike or a cat runs across your keyboard and something happens and you lose your file or your computer crashes, you'd have to start all over. So I'm going to go to Save, and I'm going to put this on my desktop, and I'm going to call this Postcards. Now notice the file extension is XCF. What that means is that Gimp will be able to open this file, and I think Photoshop can open Gimp files as well. But if you send this file to somebody, they're not going to be able to see the images that you've created. They're only going to be able to see it if they've got Gimp or Photoshop. So when we're finished with this, what we're going to do, instead of, well, we'll save it, but we'll also export the image. See, I cut that off a little bit there because I tried to do too much at once. There we go. So we'll export this out as a JPEG or as a PNG. Those are probably the two most common static image types. PNGs are really good for compression so that they will load faster on websites, and JPEGs are generally used for like big photographs because they have generally no compression on them. You can get them at higher quality. Okay. And in the interest of speed, I'm going to not be as nitpicky about this as I normally would. However, this I cannot abide. We're just going to cut all that out as well. Super duper quick. I find I could be really quick with the selection tool doing the straight geometric lines a lot better than trying to trace, because there's always a little... Nobody has a very steady hand for this kind of thing. Although it is a little bit easier if you get one of those Wacom tablets that have like a pen that you can use. But if you don't have that, then this is probably the best way to do it. Select none. I'm holding down the space button here to move around within the canvas while I'm zoomed in. I'm gonna live without my hair there, that's fine. I will be getting my eraser. Nope, that's the ellipse. Press Shift and E for the eraser. Not a perfect ear, not perfect hair, but it doesn't have to be perfect to be fun. We're just playing with it here. Okay. Good enough for government work, as my mom would always say. All right. So there I am, cut up off of my background. Let me zoom back out here. If you hold down the Command key with your magnifying glass, you can zoom out and turn off the background here. So this shows you where all of the transparency is. And we can also use these to move around. Little scroll bars. All right. So there I am in space. See that little bit of haloing around the edge? We couldn't really notice it on the white background, but when there's a lot of contrast, you can definitely see that pop up. So one more fine tuning, the eraser. Just for my own sanity's sake. There we go. And also gonna add my TARDIS in here. I'm gonna get me out of the way. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller so that it looks like it's floating in the background. Make sure you've got that layer selected when you go to use your tool. Shrink that down. And now this one, notice how it's white with a really dark black or blue line around it. This is probably the level of contrast that we want for the wand tool or the fuzzy selection tool. So if I press that inside of the white, notice it's selected pretty clearly around the edge of that. We can also add a little bit of feathering to it. What that means is it will soften the edge of the line rather than being a sharp straight line. It'll have a little fuzziness in it. And remember to select the inverse. If you remember what the quick key is for that, Command I, and then delete. Okay, so now we've cut that up off the background. We've deselected that, and I'm going to clean it up again with the eraser. Select none. Whoop. See? Careful with those big lines. Click, click, click. There we go. Clean all that extra little white space off the edge that it doesn't always get. And if this is hurtling through space, it's going to be, I want to turn it a little bit. So I got my rotation tool, and I also want to move it so that it's not competing with my head. And I'm going to put the blue over the red so there'll be a little bit more contrast there. And then I'm going to use a filter. Go up to the top here where it says filters and select blur and Gaussian blur. What this does is it gives us kind of a feeling of it like flying through space. You know, you get that motion blur when something's moving really fast. So I'm going to make it, see, it gives us these options here. You can choose how much blur is on the X and the Y, and by default they are locked together. The X-axis is going from left to right and the Y-axis is up and down. I'm going to unlink those and make it less blurry on the Y-axis and more blurry on the X-axis, so it looks like it's moving from left to right a little bit. It's flying through space in the background. If you weren't paying attention, you might almost miss that the doctor's flying through space there. All right. So the next thing we need to do to make this a postcard is to put a little bit of a text in there. And I like to put a middle ground between my text and my background. So I'm going to use my selection tool here, create a new layer. I'm going to call that middle ground. And I'm going to use my paint bucket and change the color here, double click on that. I'm going to pick something in this nice blue range. And then my paint bucket and make sure my middle ground's selected. Plop that on there. Now notice that these layers are all about an order. So I'm going to scoot my picture down below that so that this middle ground object is on top of there and we'll be easily able to read our text. Let's scoot this down just a little bit. It doesn't take up the whole thing. I only want it to take up about the bottom third. Maybe a little bit less. And then, what else would I like to do to this layer? That blue looks a little solid, so I'm going to change the opacity on this layer. You can see a little bit of me and a little bit of the background behind it there. Now I'm going to grab some text. And by default, it's going to use whatever color is in the foreground. I'm going to change this to white. And create a new layer, call it text. And then when I click in this space, it brings up a toolbar there. It'll ask me how I want this to look. So it mimics the one that's over here. By default, I think I've got Helvetica as my typeface and 60, let's do 65 point. Okay. That's okay. I want that to be a little bit bigger. So I've selected it and then I'm clicking to change that. And get my move tool here. Scoot that up. Okay. So there I am in space. I'm going to take my middle ground and text and scoot that above our other destinations here. So that way, all I have to do is turn them on. And I should be up at the top, right below that. So they're all behind me. I'll leave the TARDIS there. Okay, so that space, in order to get this into a format that everyone can use, first we'll save our work, then we will export. So by default, it's got PNG selected. If you need to change that type, go to Select File Type, this little plus bar here. Will give you lots of different options. I am going to stick with PNG. All these are in alphabetical. The other that you should probably know about is JPEG. I'm going to click PNG. And click export, and then it'll ask me a bunch of stuff that we really don't need to worry about at this. We're not going to worry about any of this stuff right now. Go ahead and hit export, and it will send that space postcard to my desktop. Let's do it again, but this time I'm going to rename it. Instead of postcards, I'm going to call this Taj Mahal postcard. Export. Turn on Egypt, file, export. After you've done this a couple of times, you start to notice that there's a quick key next to that. Did anybody notice what the quick key for exporting is? It's Command or Control E, but if you want to do save as or export as, Command and Shift and E. So we're going to do this one as Egypt postcard. Export. And finally, Animal Crossing. I'm going to adjust this one a little bit because if Isabel's not in the shot, did I really go? There we go. Yeah, that's better. export as, Shift, Command, and E. AC, postcard, and export. So now we've got lots of cool images of places that we've gone that we can send people. Say, wish we were here. Places that we'll go and travel later when we're back off of quarantine. I look forward to it. I hope you had fun playing around with some of the cool things that we can do in this program in Gimp. It's literally endless, the possibilities available to you with this software for free. So check out some of those tutorials, play around with it. If you missed something in the tutorial, we're going to have these up on our website and up on Vimeo, so you can go backtrack and figure out exactly what I did. You can always go back and take a look at that or rewind the video here. And I hope you have a lot of fun with it. I hope you make some cool stuff. Thanks. Have a great day.